I'm going to talk a little bit now after Vina's and Simon's presentations. I want to talk a little bit about how actually Psy-ShareD works. So I've already introduced the people involved in Psy-ShareD, the partners and the team rather. So I think in my introduction, I finished on a slide showing the partners. So you can see we have several partners involved currently. We're hoping to expand that. We're hoping that over the next year or longer, that number of partners expands. So we have several partners in the UK, in Europe, and globally. And we're particularly keen to involve partner institutions in as I broadly categorize as non-Western sort of geographies. So we currently have partners in India, in Japan, and so on, and in South and Central America, or in Central America currently. So we have some partnerships in progress that will bring in some South American partners as well. So that's a massive objective, really, of Psy-ShareD is to include as many sort of partners as widespread geographically as we can. So what I'm going to talk about over the next sort of 40 minutes or so is how we've gone about building the database over the last 18 months. Just the steps for data preparation and transfer and harmonization. Actually, in regards to the harmonization part, I'm going to talk very briefly about that. That's going to be covered in much more depth and detail by the analysis team in the workshop at 3:30. So that'll be Marianne and Matthew and Jack and Ruba who will lead on that. And I believe there's some interactive parts to that session as well. So hopefully that'll be really helpful. I'm going to talk about the data catalogs. Sarah's going to join me in a moment for that, just to sort of demonstrate how they work. I mean, a lot of this is still a work in progress also. I mean, we are planning to be operational around now. I think our plan is the end of 24, beginning of 25. But we are in the process, of updating data catalogs and bringing them online as and when they're ready. So I'm guessing that a lot of you will be interested in how you access the data. So I'm going to touch upon the data access procedures quite briefly. Unfortunately, we don't have time to go into loads of detail, but the detailed information is included in all our documents, like memorandums, understanding, and data access protocols, etc. And then just a little bit about data use and publication policy. Again, that's covered in our memorandum of understanding. So what is it we actually do? Because I've been wondering for the last 18 months or so, but Marianne prepared this very useful slide that I think we shared at the SIRS meeting back in April. So we initially make contact with partners and data contributors. There are a number of partners involved in the initial grant application to begin with, and since then we've added to those, as I've shown in a few slides ago. Before data can be shared, there's a quite lengthy, time-consuming process around ethics, consent, anonymization, and eventually data sharing agreements, which need to be set up between King's College London here and the contributing sites. The contributors, once the data sharing agreements are in place and signed off by both institutions, the contributors then retrieve their data, which isn't always that straightforward. The contributors then, or the partners, sorry if I use interchangeable terminology occasionally, contributors then run the scripts that we've prepared as part of Psy-ShareD that deface and provide unique anonymization codes to the data before it can be transferred. Contributors then upload the data to a secure data platform, which Ruba will talk about in a moment or two. The data is then transferred via this secure GDPR compliant server to King's College London, where we process the data in terms of organization, curation, harmonization, etc. Again, we'll go into a bit more detail about that, both in my session and later on this afternoon. And then the plan is that we make the data available, these data sets available through hopefully what's a quite light touch data application process. So just a few words then, or a few slides about the data preparation, transfer and harmonization steps. So when we begin talking with a potential partner or data contributor, the first thing that they need to really do is read and understand, the memorandum of understanding. So this is available on our website. It's updated fairly regularly, but I think the latest update is should be sufficiently current. So this is something that all data contributors and all data users must read and understand. For the data contributors, then, as I said, a data sharing agreement is set up between King's and the external site. Again, that's something that we prepared within the project. So we have I don't know if bespoke is the right word, but the contracts office here at King's College London have worked with us to prepare a Psy-ShareD data sharing agreement, which we then work with the contributing site to prepare, and then when that's all signed off, data transfer can begin via a data transfer protocol. So the data transfer protocol is something that we prepared as part of Psy-ShareD. And yes, involves, as I've already sort of said, applying anonymization scripts and de-identification. These are then sent to King's along with data transfer templates that explain how the data is organized and how all the anonymized data is linked together. Just a quick slide about data preparation for contributing sites. All of the contributing sites have a site code. So this is site number 1, for example. Site number 1 would take their DICOM images, which are usually around 176 slices, depending on the acquisition parameters. These then defaced and transferred into a NIfty file and a JSON file for each individual subject. These then have unique codes applied, which denote the site, the data set from that site, and the subjects within that site. That is then transferred via Bitbox. So I'm thinking, Ruba, can I hand over to you just to talk over the next couple of slides? So the next couple of slides really about the data transfer process. This is what we use. This is what we use to transfer data to King's from the external sites. Yeah, so Ruba, I'll let you explain this because this is something you've worked on specifically.
Well, so once we have the data ready to share with we use Bitbox to share those data. It's specifically developed for transferring medical images from multiple imaging sites to a centralized server. Right now, it's the centralized server. It's actually in King's College, and we are actually storing whatever the data we received from different sites. We are actually storing those data in King's server. So to start using Bitbox, first we have to register those imaging sites with the system, and they have to contact with the Bitbox team, and they will register that system with us. And once it's registered, we'll share some registration code with those sites, and the sender will have to use that code to register himself with the site. Once they are registered, they can actually send the data to the system. So after while they actually get the confirmation of the registration, they have to anonymize the data. We already said that Bitbox is GDPR compliant, and to maintain the GDPR regulations, we ensure that whatever the data we received in the application, those must need to be anonymized before sending it to the application. So once the data is ready, we actually shared it with Bitbox, which actually temporarily stored those data in AWS cloud system. And from there, we actually get it to the King's network. Once we have it downloaded in the centralized server, we send a confirmation to the sender. And if everything is perfect, we actually keep the data and remove it from the system. It's for the data security. So it's like a temporary storage system, and it will not store the data for long. And the Beatbox actually helps to upload multiple data at a time. So they also maintain the data integrity. Like if there is any interruption with the internet, or there is any failure of the file upload, they will not put it in the system, and they will discard the whole section, whole transaction, and the sender will have to initiate the transfer again. And whenever we store the data in the Bitbox, it's also keep the data encrypted for further security. So yeah, that's how we actually ensure the secure transfer through the Bitbox to share the data. For the next slide, I'll call yeah.
Thank you, Ruba. Yeah, so thank you, Ruba. We're hot seating here. So that explains the data, inward data transfer. Ruba is going to explain a little bit about the outward data transfer procedures in a moment or two as well. But I just want to talk a little bit about the site locations. So currently we have current sites where the data sharing agreements have been agreed. And the data has been transferred. We have 6 in the UK. I don't know how well you can see on this map, but we have sites in Edinburgh, Birmingham, Cambridge, King's College London, and Brunel. There's another one as well. We have sites in Germany, India, Italy, Japan, and Mexico. And in Italy, I think we got Italy, yeah. And we also have sites in progress where data sharing agreements are either completed or very close to being completed, but the data transfer is still hasn't taken place yet. So we've just been joined by Johns Hopkins University, who will be able to make some data available as part of the resource. Zurich have also just completed the data sharing agreement, and we have DSAs in progress with Brazil, Sao Paulo, Japan, Kyoto, and Santiago in Chile. And I think, as I said at the beginning of my talk, the plan is ongoing in terms of adding new sites and new data sets and partners. And we hope to keep that sort of going throughout the duration of the project and add new sites and partners. So yeah, our numbers should really hopefully increase. I'm not going to talk too much about the data harmonization. So obviously once we have the data, so we've talked about the data transfer process and it coming to King's and being on the King's servers. It undergoes various processing steps. Now, Mariana and the analysis team are going to talk about that at 3:30. But I'm just putting a slide here just to sort of point to it, as it were. So the data will be available potentially in 2 formats. So an image level format where we're using AI approaches to harmonize the data across the various data sets. So obviously, the harmonization needs to account for things like differences in sequence, differences in scanner, field strength, manufacturer, etc., and various other sort of multi-site variables. So we're working on that. We're working on the analysis, the validation of that approach, which we'll talk about a little bit later. The other type of data that will be available is the sort of, what we call the feature level data, which I'm sure most of you, if all of you, will be familiar with. Metrics of volume, cortical surface areas, etc. So, the kind of free surfer extraction type analysis. And again, we have scripts that can be used to harmonize that data as well. They can be applied before data access or during it. But the scripts, by the data users, but the scripts will be available for that. So these are the types of data, T1 data we'll have available as part of the project. It's this button, isn't it? So yeah, just where we are. We started in May 2023, I think. Yeah, it was beginning of May. So currently we have 42 data sets, 5 in progress, 37 which are processed. That currently amounts to 3,352 MRI T1 scans. So I'm just admitting people here. So our current numbers, which we hope will increase. In the schizophrenia populations, we have 773 and so on. We have scans in first episode psychosis. In clinical high risk, that's according to the sort of CALMS criteria, SIPS and SOPS. We have schizotypy scans in people with schizotypy. There are various ways that those were acquired, but that will be explained in the data catalogs, which Sarah is going to talk about in a moment. We also have scans in bipolar disorder, which again, we're looking very much to increase bipolar scans in the next phase of the project. We also have a number of scans in other groups, e.g. major depression, drug-induced psychosis as well, and others. We have nearly 1,000 healthy controls in which we have various levels of assessment, including childhood trauma in many of them. So Lucia talked earlier, and Vina in her presentation earlier about the sort of importance, the etiological importance of childhood trauma, and we do have assessment measures of childhood trauma in our patient groups and in our healthy controls. We have case follow-ups in 249 currently across the schizophrenia first episode and clinical high risk case categories, and we have some healthy follow-up control data also. So yeah, we've been going about 18 months, so we're approaching sort of 3,500 scans. We're hoping, in future phases or over the next year and into future phases that we'll have something approaching 5,000 or at least 4,500 scans. So that should be a pretty useful resource, we would hope. Yeah, this button. So yeah, the data catalogs. So Sarah's going to come and talk about these in a moment. These work through King's College London Figshare. This is a bit of a lazy slide because there's no way I could sort of fit on all of the linked data that we include. This is all explained in the data catalogs, but just as an overview, the data falls into sort of three areas. We have clinical data, obviously caseness or diagnosis is crucial, and we have assessment data then in addition to that, the PANS, CALMS, SPQ, HAM-D. I mean, these are just examples of the sorts of data, the linked data we have. It's by no means an exhaustive list. We also have medication status in many of the data sets, demographic, sort of age, sex, sort of ethnicity, in ethnocultural factors, education, and then cognitive data, things like IQ, working memory, verbal fluency, but many others too. I mean, of course, these vary across the different data sets. There's no way we can, unfortunately, have a sort of uniform set of linked data. As we're working with sort of legacy data sets, we have to take and work with what we're given in that regard. But this just gives you a sort of idea of some of the linked data that we have with our MRI T1 scan. So Sarah, do you want to just come and just show a little bit about how the data catalogs work?
I'm going to show you guys how the data catalogs work through Figshare. But first, we're just going to get them up. First, stop sharing that. And now we need to share a window that has the, I think it's that one that has, sorry. There we go. Perfect. Yeah. So if you guys are going to be using this, you'll go onto Figshare, and then this is the homepage that you'll see. The best way to do it is to press search, and then we have created our own license. So you'll go down to license and then filter through the Psy-ShareD data access request, apply filters. Right now, there's 31 that have been available for public view. And so I'm just going to walk you guys through one of them. We scroll down, we can do this one. So first you'll see either the title of the study or like a brief kind of explanation of what the study was, the PIs involved and the associated affiliation. Right here, you'll see what Paul was talking about, where it's just kind of a table of all the key sort of demographic details, the clinical details. There's also medication status, antipsychotic medication and other medication and recreational drug use. There is going to be more for a lot of them, but again, it's just the main ones that are listed right here. Then you have who funded the study, the history, but that's going to be very basic because it's just when it became a part of Psy-ShareD. And then you have the related materials. So this is any of the papers that came out through the data set that was used. And then this is the Psy-ShareD website link. You also have what kind of data it was, if it's longitudinal, cross-sectional, and then the dates at which the data was collected from, the collection method, and the acquisition details. If you scroll up to be able to then access the data, you can go to the license and it will take you to a PDF form. Unfortunately, then that takes you to our website. And if you click that, it will then show you where you can go ahead and access the data, or request it rather. That's pretty much the data catalogs. Yeah, thank you. Just gonna go through here.
Gonna put the slides back on.
So, back to Matt. Thank you, Sarah. Yeah. So the data sets should be pretty easy to sort of follow. As Sarah explained, they're accessed through KCL Figshare at the moment. We are hoping in phase 2 to link with DataMind, which is a new, well, not that new, I guess, but it's another UK RRI initiative, a data sharing initiative. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a second. But currently, this would be the way that potential data users would view the data sets that are available and then decide which data sets they wanted to access. And that's what I'm going to talk about next, access of data users. So this is our data access protocol. So yeah, I mean, this is sort of covering some of what we've already said. So you visit the Psy-ShareD website, you view the data catalogs through KCL, Figshare, or DataMind. They're not online on DataMind yet, but we're planning to integrate or interface with DataMind very shortly. You would then select the data sets that you wish to use. So these have codes such as Psy-ShareD 0101 or Psy-ShareD 2101 and so on, which denotes site information. And then when you decided when a data user decides which data sets they wish to use, maybe 4 or 5, they submit a data access request form, which we'll look at in a second. That's then reviewed, and when we review it, we're not. Yeah, I mean, this is sort of new to us, but I think we really just want to monitor. Well, we need to monitor. We're required to monitor who's accessing which data sets. We also need to gain approval from the PIs of those data sets that have been requested. I mean, these are data sets that have been shared through data sharing agreements. They're old legacy data sets. They're anonymized completely and have been published. That there are no reasons why PIs shouldn't give approval, but let's wait and see. But yeah, so we require a data request application, which is then approved by the PIs of the data sets whose data is being requested. Then a data access contract is initiated between King's and the receiving institution. Again, we haven't done this yet. The outgoing data sharing contracts are being prepared now. Again, we're hoping it's very light touch and something that can, in 9 sort of cases out of 10, be a sort of standard agreement that can be signed off relatively straightforwardly and quickly. And then once the data access agreement contract is completed and signed off, data will be transferred via DataLad, which I'll bring Ruben back to talk about in a minute. But also we're hoping to use DataMind. They're currently developing a trusted research environment, which we may be able to use as well for outward data sharing and access. The data access request form, I don't know how well people can see that. It's quite small on my screen, so I'm just going to look up at the television behind me, the monitor behind me. So, pretty obvious stuff: date of application, applicant's name, position, affiliation, so on. And then I think in terms of the project, it's as I've said, we're hoping to keep this sort of straightforward and light touch. So there would be a short project description of around 350 words, which covers the background and aims, the hypotheses, and the analysis plan. And then the specific requests for data, as I've explained, you use the data catalogs to specify which data sets you wish to access and which linked variables you require access to. And of course, that then links back to your hypotheses and your analysis plans in the previous section. Then there are some other fields or sections that need completing, predicted timeline for project, collaborators. This is important for the outward sort of data sharing contract. We need to know if any third-party institutions will need access to the data. I suspect that won't be the case very often, but it's something that we need to know at the outset. Maybe a few words about the suggested publications and then the approval sign-offs. So, it's not, I've seen much more complicated application procedures for data sharing initiatives such as Psy-ShareD, that run into 8-12 pages easily. We're hoping that, this will be a couple of pages at most, but, until we've actually initiated a few, we won't know for sure how that will work. But this is the plan. Data use and publication policy. Let's talk about that for a little bit. The detail is in the memorandum of understanding document, which is on the website, so you can go and download that and read through it. Just before I sort of go into the publication policy, Ruba, do you want to say a little bit about the data, using DataLad for outward data sharing? I'm going to swap again.
Sorry. Well, I'm back again. So once the data request access get approved, we actually right now we are following the workflow that actually mentioned in the left graph. So right now we are actually storing all the data in King server. We also use DataLad, which is an open source distributed data management system that can keep the version of the data. So it's a version control system to keep all the history of the data set. So first we actually use DataLad to get all the versions of the data set, and then we also use Psy-ShareD there to get the catalog of those particular data sets. Once someone actually requested to have access the data set, we shared it through Gnode infrastructure. It's an open source data repository platform where we just upload the data and share the link with them. It's not a public repository. We can access control based on the collaborator list. So whoever actually requests the data, we just share that link with them, and it's not publicly open. They can get the data there and they can open it through browser and download the data in their system. But in near future, our plan is to move into the data mine that can keep all those things, that can actually follow all this procedure. So hopefully near future, we'll use data mine for sharing our data. For the next slide, all is coming back.
Yeah, I'll come back. So just to continue on from Ruba about DataMind. So DataMind are a UKRI funded data sharing hub, and we're working with DataMind hopefully in the next phase on their trusted research environment. And when this is up and running, the plan or the hope is that we can just transfer data to DataMind. Any data that's been requested through the data access procedure can be transferred to DataMind, where platforms will be available for analyses, various types of analyses. So that's something we're going to try and develop over the next phase, the next 2 to 3 years. In the interim period, the data will be transferred through DataLad, as explained by Ruba. But the hope is that in the near future, the not too distant future, we will have the ability to create a trusted research environment where the data is stored, accessed, and analyzed, all in sort of one place, as it were. So we'll keep people updated about that. In terms of the publication policy, we request that manuscripts will be submitted to Psy-ShareD Partnership prior to submitting to a journal. Again, this is part of the monitoring procedure that we need to sort of keep on top of in terms of knowing which publications are being submitted. People involved in the design, analysis and writing parts of the project, usually the data users, first or last authors, will be listed as first and last authors. In addition to that, we'll be asking that the Psy-ShareD Partnership just, is acknowledged on the author line, the way that Enigma working groups often are. And in addition to that, any Psy-ShareD partners who are PIs of the data sets that are being used, who also may be involved in advising for the analysis and the write-up of the paper as well. Funding is by the Medical Research Council, the UK Medical Research Council, so we would ask that that is acknowledged also. And sort of confirmed approval from all authors is required before submission, but that's really the same in any situation anyway. I think all journals now, you have to tick a box that all authors and co-authors have given their approval. These details are, these points are outlined in much more detail in the Memorandum of Understanding, as well as additional policies for symposium abstracts, etc. So I think that is kind of the end of my session. So at 3:30 we'll be, so now just under an hour's time, we'll be beginning the interactive analysis and session. So hopefully you'll all be able to sort of rejoin for that